We have, over the last couple of lessons, managed to create a routine that uses a user form to ask for a bit of input from the user. So effectively we're creating our own dialog boxes really. Now using the user form stage 4, you'll find that in the Visual Basic it has our form in place and it has a routine to call the form called run form. However, if we try to run form from the immediate window, we get the user form, we can choose whatever we want, we can click OK, and then we hit an issue in that no cells were found. Because we've selected an area, or in fact we've not selected an area that has any cells that meet our requirements, i.e. they have constant values in them, and our user form routine falls over. So we need to create a way of calling the user form, but only calling it if it's applicable. So let's end this problem. So we need a new sub-procedure that will not only call our user form, which the run form does, and we see that in module 1. There's our run form. All it gets told to do is to display the user form called case show. Really, our run form ought to check first, so we need to introduce an if, that a selection has been made. So we'll say if, and we're going to use a function called type name that checks the selection, which is a keyword. So if the selection, so everything we've got highlighted, its type name is a range, therefore it's a range, then we can go ahead and show our user form called case show. Else, we'll put a little message out that says, please select a range. It's going to be a OK box only, and we can put a little title, error. And don't forget your end if. So our run form has now been changed to say that a selection must be made before we run the case choice user form, else they'll get a little error message. Obviously our own error message. So we're now making sure that a range is selected so that if a chart is selected or something else is selected, we don't end up with problems. So let's insert a piece of clip art just to have something different. So I have a piece of clip art here. I have the clip art selected. Let's go into the Visual Basic and run our form. Please select a range. The range of cells was not selected. So we're allowing for that problem. If we then select some cells, put a piece of text in there, run our form, go lowercase. Everything seems okay. Back in Excel, we can see it's lowercase. We do, however, get another problem if your range actually contains no text values that obviously can have their case changed. Because if we go to the Visual Basic, run our form, choose whatever case we like, no cells were found. Now a selection of a range has been made. It just happens to be that there's no cells within that range that meet our requirements. When we click debug, we end up here. So there's no cells that are classed as constants within that range. So we have an issue. So instead of allowing that to become an issue or putting a little note that says make sure you put something in your range, we can use our error trapping to say on error, go to, and we'll create a little error message. Error message we will create lower down in this routine. No space in the go to. After all the ifs and the unloading of the form, so the closing of the user form, we can exit the sub and at that point put our label. And that's going to be our message box with the fact that although they've got a range selected, there are no cells within that range that meet our requirements. You must have some text cells for this to work. VB OK only. So then we can try running our form again. Notice we only have one cell selected, which is still a range, but it doesn't have any text in it. So when we say OK, you must have some text cells for this to work. I don't want to proceed, so I click cancel. So we've used calling sub-procedure to make sure a range is selected. Then within the form itself, on the OK button, we've had to check that we're selecting cells that meet our requirements. So by using a generic error trap, really, any errors occur at all, we're going to error message. Remember this from before, from error trapping. Remember that you have to exit the sub after all the other code before you start putting any labels in. Otherwise, code will continue past that unload and run the error message box anyway. Then we have our label that we're going to and our error that will come out. The last step really here for our procedure to work is not to have to go into the Visual Basic and choose Run From the immediate window. We need to be able to activate this piece of code from Excel. Now there are a number of ways of doing that. Quick one for the moment, we will look at other ways of calling procedures, is to add a keyboard shortcut. In order to add a keyboard shortcut within Excel, we go to Macros, we find our procedure which is there, Run Form, we go to Options, and we add our keystroke. Control is taken already as default. I would always suggest that with Excel that you do a Shift key. So I'm going to say Control Shift C for case. The reason I suggest you put a shift in is because Control C is actually copy, and if you add that to this procedure, that'll take it away from the copy, which is what people are expecting it to do. So you need to use obscure-ish, but not too obscure but people can't remember them, keyboard shortcuts. So Control Shift C will do our change case. So if we put some text in, and that's all a mishmash of different texts, we highlight that, we do our keyboard shortcut, Control Shift C, and let's make it all lowercase. And it all goes lowercase. Now the ability to change the case in Excel is extremely useful because it's not actually built in to the ribbons anyway. It is in Word, and people expect to be able to change the case in Word, but in Excel it's not one of the default options. Now you have the ability, using VBA, to write your own user form so that the interface is nice and neat. So when we do our keyboard shortcut, that's a fairly neat interface. Obviously you can make it neater or tidier. People can choose the case they require, and when we click OK, it's applied to the selected cells. We've built in error trapping, just in case somebody selects something that isn't a range, such as we have here the piece of clip art. And if anybody selects a range that actually doesn't have any text in, that can have its case changed. So we're covering all the eventualities there. That's the issue when it comes to programming now, is you need to allow for all the possibilities that could occur when a human is involved with your application. So it's thinking out all those possibilities, allowing for all those possibilities, and programming for all those possibilities, using lots of ifs to catch options, and the nice little on error which we've seen time and time again.